So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Prevention is better than the cure with cybersecurity. I'm hoping that my colleagues are going to join me. My name's Tony Mannion and I'm Sales Development Manager at Solutions PT. So joining me on the webinar today are Natalie Richardson, who's Product Manager at Mac Solutions, Noel Slane, Regional Vice President, and George Chikeras, the Sales Engineering Team Leader from OPSWAT, one of the leading suppliers of data management and protection solutions. So good afternoon, everybody.
Afternoon, Tony.
Afternoon, Tony.
So during the presentation today, I will be keeping microphones muted, but please do there's a question and answer facility within Zoom. So please use that to post your questions. I'll keep an eye on it during the discussion and we'll hopefully be able to answer those questions for you today. We're also going to be asking some questions. So I'd like to ask you all to download the Kahoot app from kahoot.com. So that's KAHOOT.com. And at the end of the webinar, we're going to have a bit of a fun quiz. It's become a bit more than just a fun quiz, though, because our friends at OPSWAT have offered to put up £100 and £50 Amazon voucher to whoever comes first or second. So first and second, rather. So listen carefully, because there's some good rewards in place. And as the host, if nobody enters the competition, then the vouchers default to me. So just make sure that you join that. Keep me away from the vouchers. So today we're going to be talking mostly around pharmaceutical and medical device companies. Although one of the things that is apparent to me whenever I talk to different companies about OT cybersecurity is the amount of similarities that there are between these companies and industries. But certainly with pharmaceutical and medical device companies, whenever I speak to them, it's really clear that confidentiality and data integrity are key drivers for them. And there's a good reason for that. Firstly, data is required for audit purposes, for regulatory compliance. And without that, they can't take their product to market. So it's essential. The other element is the IP that these companies own. And that IP makes up a huge portion of their overall market value. So it's really important that they protect that. So as a response to this, many of the companies that I've spoken to have adopted things like air gapping as a form of defense. But certainly what we've seen over the last couple of years is that cyber attacks are getting more complex and that even air gapping now doesn't offer the full protection that people were expecting. Many companies have also invested a lot in building secure perimeters around their ICS infrastructure. But do they actually know what people are bringing on sites when a system needs updating or maintaining? Very often a contractor may have visited a number of sites that week before they actually visit the customer, or even our own employees now are spending more time working from home on networks that may not be as secure as they would be in their working environment. And I'm a great example of that. I've got 4 smart assistants around the house. I use a smart doorbell. I've got Wi-Fi security cameras. They're all connected to my network. I'm a sitting duck. So if I visit site, make sure you don't allow me to attach my laptop to your network. So another thing that's really sort of hit home over the last couple of weeks, I started in the supplying solutions into the OT environment nearly 20 years ago. And at the time, people used to explain the difference between IT and OT in very simplistic terms. And very often they talk about how for IT, the priority list is confidentiality, integrity, and then availability. Whereas for OT, that was actually turned on its head. So availability was king. And I've really started to see some attitudes change across the industry. And I think it's probably cybersecurity is certainly driving those changes. But I think now that with the solutions that have been developed, particularly for the OT environment, to maintain that availability, companies are now able to prioritize all three without a compromise on any of the others. So I mentioned before about pharmaceutical and medical device companies, and that's one of the reasons that we've put this webinar together, because we have seen a growth in the take-up of data protection and management solutions over the last 12 months by pharmaceutical and medical device companies. But Natalie, I want to come to you first of all, because I know that certainly yourself and Mac Solutions have been supplying this type of solution across numerous industries for a good number of years. So I guess before we really get into the detail, what have you found the market like in general?
Yeah, so thank you very much for the introduction, Tony. So yes, Mac have been supplying cyber solutions for many years now across multiple industries in critical national infrastructure. And I think that the general increase in interest has really been fueled by regulatory compliance and a number of high profile breaches. So the threat to operational technology and industrial control systems is a major concern across all industries at the moment anyway. So the National Cybersecurity Centre has seen examples internationally where OT has been targeted by cyber attacks. And that's ranging from modifying industrial processes through to disrupting them entirely. So the customers that we have at Mac currently in energy, transport, water supply and healthcare, they've all been working towards being compliant with the NIS directive and also the cyber assessment framework. And this has a number of objectives, which include managing security risk, protecting against cyber attacks, detecting security events, and also minimizing the impact of incidents. So we've seen increased threats in data breaches and viruses coming in through removable media over the last few years. And removable media introduces the capability to transfer and store huge volumes of sensitive information, as well as the ability to import malicious content. So really the reason we've seen, helped so many companies is due to the loss of sensitive information, malware being introduced, and also reputational damage due to loss of media.
Yeah, reputational damage is huge, isn't it, when there's a cyber incident? And it's interesting to see that some of the drivers that you're seeing in other industries mirror some of the things that we saw from the discussions earlier on with pharmaceutical companies. So about the loss of data and the protection of data. Noel, I know that you've seen an increase across the board in these solutions over the last 12 months, but particularly in pharmaceutical and medical device. Are you noticing any commonality in the drivers from your end? And I know that there's been a recent success story published that includes some of those. Are they kind of typical for what you're seeing?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. In terms of trends and commonality, there's probably a few points that Natalie has already brought up or referenced that I see across the EMEA region. We also have some of our colleagues in the US that are seeing consistent trends in the industry. So I guess the first thing is how lots of these pharmaceutical companies are structured. So many of them follow a variation of the Purdue model, where they've got different network layers segmented to try and protect sensitive data and information. And one of the big challenges they've faced is they're trying to improve their operational efficiencies. So they're investing in big data and big analytics, and some of the systems they would previously never have connected to the internet, they now are starting to do or think around how to modernize and gain those operational efficiencies. So in doing so, and part of that development process, they start to open themselves up to a degree of risk. So big push for operational gain, efficiencies and modernization. couple of other things we see that are consistent. Natalie talked about regulatory oversight and compliance. So that's a huge factor in a few of these industries, particularly in pharmaceuticals. Very rigid processes around the production of drugs, etc., the different stages, the environments in which they are created, the devices and the people that move in and interact with them. So it's definitely similar to the likes of finance or nuclear and energy in terms of the regulatory oversight that they have to contend with. And that does put a big burden on the organization around the types of people, devices and processes that they have to put in place to try and monitor. I think that one of the other big things that we see across the piece, and this is probably the biggest driver of change, is that people like Russia and China and North Korea don't want to spend 10 years developing new products and services. They don't want to put in the multi-billions of dollars that's required to come up with a new drug. So they really want to short circuit that process through theft. And that theft is coming through a number of ways and factors. And the people that we speak to in that recent success story that we've had a number of very large global pharmaceuticals tell us they are seeing incidents. They're seeing people that are being physically reconnaissanced, people actually trying to build up a profile of some of their plants. There's a lot of social engineering happening where they're trying to learn trends and profiling people within the organization. And they're very concerned, and they are seeing incidents happening. I think everyone's aware of the Merck breach that cost them $300 million in one quarter. So that really sent alarm bells ringing across the pharmaceutical industry to try and understand what they can put in place to keep themselves secure. So one of the things that we did, and I'm not going to go into huge detail in it, we helped with their depth of understanding them get to grips with the business process changes around transient assets, contract resources, and people moving in and around different sites and between different security zones. There's a lot of complexity for those organizations to try and understand internally before they even engage with a third party like ourselves. But because of our lineage and evolving from sort of nuclear and energy space, pharmaceutical have faced a lot of the same challenges. So we were able to overcome those. And again, there is consistent commonality of challenges they face across the piece.
Great. Okay, thank you for that, Noel. And it sounds like they've got complex business processes, there's multiple attack vectors, there's multiple bad actors. It sounds really complex. So, George, when you take all those complexities together and then you add a number of different sites with their own different challenges, what capabilities were you able to deliver that was able to help the customer to overcome these issues?
Yes, thank you, Tony, for the question. So in this particular case, we were presented with 10 different use cases. Like Tony said, 30 different global sites. Usually those sites have their own requirements also. There's obviously a global requirement, but there's variations of that in each particular site. And that adds complexity to the solution that we would have to deliver. So there's obviously a need for a solution that's very flexible and can address all the challenges that were the challenges that exist. So what we did here is those 10 use cases were mainly around how we transfer data between security zones or different security zones. So like in any OT environment, there's security zones with lower security and different network segment with a higher security requirement. So the data transfer between the two is very important. And how we do that, obviously, do we do that in an automatic way? Do we add some people into the process and so on and so forth? Those were the challenges that we were presented with. And then the solution that we come up with, it's a combination of the different products that we have to address the general challenge, but also cater for the individual site requirements. And to support this, I'm going to start sharing very quickly a PowerPoint just so we can see what I mean by just doing that. So here's an explanation of the internal process that we use to make sure those files that get transferred between security zones are clean and safe. So that's what's happening behind the scenes. You have a user coming, scanning their portable media, and that's what's happening on the system. We do file type verification. We make sure the files are not spoofed. The extension is the correct one. We extract everything from that file. Then we apply 4 different technologies to make sure that file is secure. The first one is multi-scanning. So like the name says, we combine different antivirus engines into one single solution to scan the file at the same time. And we can do that by providing up to 35 different AV engines. So 35, that's an impressive number. Obviously, the benefits of doing that are obvious. Increased detection rate, quicker response time to new outbreaks, but also spreading the risk. You're not, as a customer, you don't really have to rely on one single AV vendor to protect your most critical assets. At the end of the day, the security, it's a trust game, right? You have to trust that specific vendor. Their algorithm is good enough to detect any type of threat that comes your way. And I think more than in any time, the pharma industry is under attack with this pandemic. So after multi-scanning, we try to check if there's any known vulnerabilities in those files, especially if there's if the binaries include, let's say, very popular libraries that might have known vulnerabilities. And this is where we go back to the supply chain challenge, right? And the supply chain concern. It's not only about malware, it's making sure that the contractor that comes in has a software that doesn't really have major vulnerabilities. They don't come and patch one of your networking equipment, which runs in the OT environment. And by doing that, they introduce vulnerabilities into the network. So it's not only malware. Then we de-weaponize the files using a technology called deep CDR, content, disarm, and reconstruction. So essentially what we do here is we remove the active content, which you see that's usually exploited in, I would say, most of the data breaches out there. That's how the payload gets into a system, by leveraging one of those active objects. And when I say active objects, I mean anything from a malicious macro to all the way to a weaponized image, where the metadata of that image is actually modified to run some piece of script. And at the end of that process, we can check if there's any sensitive information. Obviously, that might not sound very, why would I check for sensitive information? But knowing that many regulations that the business has to follow, GDPR is one of them. If you don't deal with sensitive information as a business, then why should you accept sensitive information in your network? If you have to accept sensitive information, then you have to have the security controls in place to make sure that sensitive information stays there and only the right people have access to that information. So there's an entire process here that we help the customer to implement. And obviously at the end, we have the clean file, which goes into the network. Now, how does that happen? Well, it's like it says here, it's a secure, flexible, and easy to use process. We have a machine called MetaDefender Kiosk on the low side of the network, or in the DMZ or the reception area, if it's a manufacturing facility, where the contractor comes with their portable media. And that portable media can be anything from a USB drive all the way to even a floppy disk. We actually have customers that still use floppy disks today. Believe it or not, yeah, it's still a thing. That shows how different the OT environment still is versus the IT environment, going back to your statement, Tony. So they come, they plug the media in the OPSWAT kiosk, which looks like an ATM machine. So it's there to also make a statement, right? This organization has the security controls in place to make sure the data that gets into our network, it's clean. And then we start scanning the file with the technologies which I mentioned, those 4 different technologies: multi-scanning, deep CDR, vulnerability assessment, and we can also check for sensitive information. And there's obviously going to be two types of files, or say two categories. Block files, so those files, we don't want them in our network. What's happening here is we can obviously delete them from the USB, or they can just stay on the USB, as long as we choose to transfer only the clean files. And there are three transfer methods. All three we apply to this customer. Like I said, different sites, different requirements. One site, they want to allow the usage of portable media into the OT network. Other side, they don't want to take the risk. There's no need for that. So we completely remove the portable media usage in the OT network. And I'm going to explain how this is possible. So say we take the low branch here, the one at the bottom. So how can we transfer the clean data to the OT network in an automatic way? So even through a data diode, where there's say the true air gap, where the two networks are connected through a data diode, we can work with, I would say, 80% of the data diode vendors of the world, and I guess it's about 30 of them or so. We transfer the clean files only to a server called MetaDefender Vault. Files get stored here. The guest or the contractor receives a one-time access token, which is time limited. So they have access to those files only for 1 hour, for example. We print the receipt, and that person takes the receipt, leaves all their belonging in the reception, and hands the receipt to their contact in this network, and they retrieve the file, and then the files are used at their destination. If we have to use the USBs, we would transfer the files to a dedicated a company provided USB that's provided by the customer. Only those USBs are allowed in this network. But what's happening here, to make sure no one can actually bypass the process, we would sign the USB with a certificate to prevent anyone to tamper with the data. So if they add extra data after the USB has been scanned, or if they modify anything, the USB won't be able to be used in that network. And we do that by just deploying a small agent on the workstations. The last case is where we need to transfer data to machines where we cannot install anything. PLCs, HMIs, those type of machines where if you install something, you just lose the warranty, or the vendor doesn't really allow you to install anything there. And for that, we have a product called MetaDefender USB Firewall, which is actually the USB interface for that machine. And that's where you plug the USB drive. And the USB firewall, it's actually going to make sure the USB drive has gone through the security controls that you implemented. Has it been scanned in the kiosk? Is everything clean? Has data, or do we have data integrity? If all those conditions are met, then you can transfer data to that machine to maybe configure a PLC, for example. So that's the process. That's what we implemented at this customer. We're at the moment rolling out to the 30 different sites. We did that for a couple of sites already. Everything works well. We're now rolling the solution globally. And I guess in conclusion, I would just like to say, this is not only a security solution that we provide, but it's actually building a process together with the customer for data transfer, removing overhead of the data transfer, bringing security, and helping them be compliant with different regulations that they might have be, right? A global customer would be affected by GDPR in Europe. It would be affected by HIPAA in the US. It would be affected by the OT cybersecurity frameworks like NERC-CIP, maybe, if they run SCADA equipment. So there's loads of certifications and frameworks the customers have to be compliant with, and this is the solution that helps them achieve that. Thank you.
George, that was great. Thank you for an explanation that even I could understand. And it sounds as though, certainly for this customer, they had lots of different requirements, but the flexibility of the solution really would help to be able to meet all of those different requirements. So it takes away having to manage different solutions on each site. So that's fantastic. So I think we have got a question that's come through for you, George, which you're answering, but we've had a question through, can you scan USB that are encrypted with solutions like Bitlocker?
Yeah, I was about to type the answer in the chat, but I think, yeah, it's better if we do that for everybody to actually hear that. Yeah, I mean, we support encrypted drives as long as there is a way for you as an end user to put the password or the PIN code. Anything that prompts the user to put the decryption key, it works. Mm-hmm. Software encryption, it's a bit more difficult because the vendors wouldn't allow us to actually run the code and decrypt. So that's not supported, but we provide a full list of devices we support. And we do that during the POC phase with customers just to make sure their inventory of devices that they use already is supported. Or if they plan to do a hardware refresh on those USB devices, those will be supported by OPSWAT.
Great, thank you for that.
Sure.
So, Noel, with one eye on those Amazon vouchers, I'm going to give you a chance here to really blow your trumpet. So in these circumstances, why did OPSWAT stand out from the competition? So why would you say that you were the successful partner of choice in this project?
Great question. There's a very simple answer. As an organization, we have evolved from a background where we have learned about the challenges, not just the technology challenges, the business process challenges that people who operate in an OT environment face. So our lineage goes back 17 years, and we started to work with nuclear facilities, big energy companies, and those people face the same or very similar challenges to the likes of large pharmaceuticals. So what we have developed is a suite of products, and in this particular instance, the kiosk, the vault, vulnerability assessment, and client licenses. So it's not just one product, it's a number of products that talk seamlessly together. So dependent on the environment and the requirement, our technology or our suite of technologies allow organizations to fulfill a number of different potential business use cases. Let me give you one very short example. If the policy in a particular site was that no portable media or external contractors were allowed to bring data in, you can use our kiosk with our secure file transfer system as a gateway technology into the organization, transfer data into DMZ. If the policy was a little bit more flexible and you allowed contractors to bring, or existing staff to bring their own USB keys to get it scanned in our kiosk and then bring it to an endpoint, we also have a client license that installs what we call a magic key or a manifest that only allows them to open and see files that have got that manifest from our kiosk. So basically ensuring that there was no nefarious act between the initial scan and accessing the data. Third thing, a third potential option, if the policy is that no external devices are allowed, for example, it's only company approved, what you can do is use our kiosk solution as a scanning station to transfer information safely onto a pre-approved device. So the fact that we had all of those different options, and that depending on the types of sites, so George talked about 30 sites, so this pharmaceutical company has 30. We've rolled out a number of them successfully so far. They're not uniform, they're all different. Whenever they assessed our technology, they knew that we could multi-scan, we could do data sanitization, vulnerability checks, and also DLP. We were far and away in the market. And I can say it absolutely confidently, far and away ahead of terms of anybody that does the same or similar things. The last thing I would say that we did, and I can applaud George for this, is most of the organizations and pharmaceutical industry, energy, etc., it's not just about buying technology. And George and I attended site with one of the system integrators that were thinking of implementing one of these large projects. High level and low level design of a project of this nature is very complicated. It can be complicated if you're not sure where to go and how to start. So having a strong lineage in this space George and a few of the other senior engineering team were able to present high-level and low-level diagrams to help the partner and the organization understand how they could consume the technology easily. What are the business process challenges? What are the workflows that other organizations with the same types of environments face? We found that the combination of the technology and the fact we'd done it before, and we were able to make it easy for them to understand, take those diagrams and know that they could share it internally, even the high-level diagrams, that they could understand how it would be implemented and rolled out on a global basis. Those are the key reasons why we were successful.
Great, thanks, Noel. And I think it's really important. It's not just a deep knowledge of cybersecurity. It's also the business processes. It's the OT environment. Bringing all those together are essential for a successful project, and it certainly sounds like you've done that. I guess the other question for that maybe some people are thinking of, if they're in a similar situation, Noel, can you give us an idea of maybe the timescales from perhaps first engagement through to project implementation?
Okay, so I've a number of different examples where we've had this. So there's probably two things large pharma, energy, and nuclear organizations tend to do. So one would be work through a lightweight proof of concept, where if you have 30 sites globally, you might implement one or two test sites. From initial engagement, going through a proof of concept process, looking at high level and low level design work, that could be done typically in under 6 months. We can do it immediately, so that can happen in a matter of weeks. It isn't an issue for us operationally with the kiosks, or for example the software. That's a fast process. But what we find is the organizations need to start to understand the ramifications of the change, the business processes, etc. So sometimes the speed or the time frame is happening on the organization side, so it takes a lot of different stakeholders to be involved, to have a buy-in, etc. So usually 3 to 6 months we can have a completed proof of concept, and then between 6 and 12 months we've seen a variation of timeframes. You would have a full rollout process starting to happen within the organization.
Okay, that's great. And again, another question from me. Mac Solutions and Solutions PT, we have quite a wide portfolio of cybersecurity solutions, and we always believe there's no silver bullet. People do have multiple solutions to prevent cyber events. How are you able to integrate within the customer's various sites with the investment they've already made in cybersecurity?
Mm-hmm. Great question. So that varies, I guess, depending on the requirement of the site. There's probably two things that I've seen. So a lot of the time, these organizations are extremely large, complicated. They will look for our support as a vendor, but then us to have professional services or key implementation and support partners. So the likes of Solutions PT that have deep level understanding of the industry and are able to provide that professional service or implementation or post-implementation support. They also want to understand then, in some instances, if they can consume our solutions as a managed service, where they don't want to manage the kiosks, the solutions, or the systems, etc. And again, we've had many different implementations where those services have been sold or bought by them as a managed service, and then managed by the likes of a Solutions PT, so they can consume us in a number of different ways that makes it easy for their organization. The question you asked specifically was around integration with other solutions they've already invested or made. A lot of the time, because of we're seen as a gateway technology or solution, these organizations want to understand or consume the log information from us, usually through a SIM or SIEM. So they may have Splunk, ArcSight, Logarithm, some form of SIEM solution where they're aggregating the logs from the various points that we provide. They may be correlating that data or that information along with other threat intel. So we have a very simple and easy integration for them to be able to access that information.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Noel. So Natalie, I just mentioned there that we do have different solutions. It'd be interesting to understand from yourself how you go about helping customers to evaluate if the solution is going to be right for them with a solution such as this.
Yeah, so in the first instance, we would arrange a number of fact-finding calls, really just to discuss the current challenges or the risks that the business is facing right now. And also for us to get a better understanding of the requirements. And at the same time, we would do an online demonstration that would be done via, let's say, like George at OPSWAT. And then further down the line, we would do a POC, as Noel mentioned earlier on. So we would go through a POC for a number of, well, maybe 30 to 90 days, sorry, depending on the project. And this is working really well and has been working really well for our current customers.
Fantastic. Okay, so yeah, we really help the customer understand what benefit they're going to get, and can even help them see that in practice in their own situation with their own data, just so that it's full transparency, which I think is an essential process when you are investing in a product like this. But that's really great. Thank you. So I guess the final things for me to do now are firstly to thank Noel, George and Natalie for joining me today, and for sharing your knowledge, for sharing your experiences. It's been great. So thank you for that. And thank you to everybody who's attended. We will be sending an email after the event that will include a link to a recording of this webinar. So please feel free, if you want to send that to colleagues, give them a taste of what we've been talking about today if you think that this is going to be a solution that can help you. We talked about evaluation before. It's really important to us that we can help you evaluate the right products, make sure that you're going to get what you're expecting. So whatever your focus, please do get in touch with us. Between the three companies, we've got a vast amount of experience in delivering cybersecurity solutions to the OT environment. So whatever it is you're focusing on, we will have come across it before. We've probably integrated solutions for it before. Please do come and pick our brains. It's a really important subject, and it's becoming more and more important in our industry all the time. So before I leave today, the last thing I'm going to do is just share some contact details, and please feel free to take notes of those. Again, these will be included. These details will be included when we send around our follow-up email. Thank you very much for your time today. And I hope whatever you're looking to do going forward, it's successful. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.